Okay, thanks for joining us today, guys. We're joined today by John Pearce of the Handball Academy down in Dorset. So John's a very good friend of mine and former colleague, so welcome today, John. Good to have you on.
That's right.
So John, for those who don't know you, can you give us a bit of a background in terms of how you got into coaching, your kind of education, previous roles, experience, all that kind of stuff, and kind of where that's taken you today?
Sure, yeah, no worries. Started off really helping my dad's rugby team back in when I was like 12, 13. My dad ran a rugby team, under 8s and that sort of stuff. And occasionally he would ask me to help out. So I'd go down there, do a few drills, help out, hold some bags, that sort of thing. Then when I got a bit older and took rugby a bit more seriously, going through academy setups and that sort of stuff, I helped them out with the under 13s, under 14s, and took it a little bit more seriously then, doing little doodles of sketches of drills and that sort of stuff. And that was rugby, and then sort of from there, my own athletic career sort of took off. I got involved in UKSport Talent ID system back in 2008, building up to London 2012 Olympics. So transitioned from rugby and handball through that process, and then sort of over my 6 years playing with Team GB, built up to London 2012 Olympics. During that period, I started to get involved with some of the youth programs that GB ran, well, British Handball ran and England Handball ran, sort of primarily firstly coaching under 18s, and then starting at GB under 19s and then through GB under 21s, which has sort of led on to me post Olympics taking a team through from under 20s to under 21s, but finished last year at the World Championship qualifiers, and then sort of from there stepping away from sort of, I guess you've made maybe elite youth development and changing into sort of like junior development or participation level, where I've been working with my handball club, Poole Phoenix Handball, and Dorset Handball as well. So sort of started off at the elite end really, was probably a bit strange, and then sort of jumped all the way back down to participation, grassroots sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So what teams are you currently involved in or playing a role in?
So my most recent international stuff was GB under 21s, which I stepped away from last year, and now I'm working with Poole Phoenix under 6s, under 18s, and Dorset Handball under 14s and under 16s as my main sort of coaching outlets, and then I do a little bit of regional academy stuff and a little bit of national academy stuff every now and again if I'm asked. But I'd say my main focus definitely now being the junior development stuff.
Cool. So you mentioned obviously the Talent ID program and coming across from rugby to handball, being a transition athlete. Can you tell us a bit about that process, kind of from start to finish? Like, how did you kind of get involved? What was the testing that put you through? How did you get selected for that program?
Yeah, sure, no worries. So I went to local university where I was studying construction engineering at the time. Went straight from secondary school, from college straight into university. Did a year and a half there. I think like most frustrated rugby players at the time who don't get their academy contracts through, I sort of went to Loughborough to go and play rugby really. That was my main focus. Sort of picked up pretty quickly that I didn't have an in, or it wasn't quite going the way I wanted to go. Walked into the uni main board area, and there was a sign on the notice board saying, "Do you think you have what it takes to go London 2012?" And I sort of thought, yeah, I do. Signed my name down on the dotted line, sent off an application form, got one back 2 weeks later saying, "Congratulations, you've been selected for handball." And I was like, "What the hell is handball?" Had a vague idea of what it was. I had a vision of throwing something, but that was about it. And from that, got selected to go to a trial in Nottingham to start off with, and then a 2-day trial in Sheffield. Got through the trial in Nottingham, did the 2 days in Sheffield, and then got taken up to Denmark for a week, and this is all during 2007. And then from that week in Denmark, got asked to join the final trial squad. So I think we got cut down from about 6,000 athletes who went through the talent identification program. So with London 2012 in mind, UKSport didn't have enough places or enough people to fill all their qualified for spots. So when you host the Olympic Games, you have automatic qualification for every single event. So volleyball, handball, water polo, fencing, some long distance running events. Team GB didn't have athletes for, so that's why the UKSport identification program was put in place. So through that year in 2007, whilst working and doing my undergrad, successfully completed the program, got asked to go in and join, and then started 2008. I was asked to move my life to Denmark and join the full-time program. It was a bit of a whirlwind experience and then completely different, but I'd always dreamed of playing for England, or always dreamed of representing the national team. I didn't really care what sport that was in. I just wanted to reach what I thought was my athletic potential at the time.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a bit about the trial process. Was it a case of throwing in the deep end and seeing you guys play handball, or was it just physical measurements, anthropometrics? What were they looking at?
So when we started on your first trial, or your first application, you had to put in your sporting background. What sports did you play? How often do you play sports? What level did you play to? They asked for stuff like height, weight, all that sort of thing. I sent that all off, and that's what they sort of made their decision on. So they made their decision on what sport they'd put you forward for, literally based on what you wrote down on your form. So I think the options that they were looking at to start off with were rowing, water polo, volleyball, and handball were the four choices. Off what I put on my form, I got selected for handball, and again I had no idea what it was for. First test in Nottingham was just one day. It was kind of like a testing day. You had a height, weight, 20-metre sprint, some basic passing and catching exercises, some basic shooting exercises, a little bit of the rules, and then they threw you straight into games. I think there was a couple of EIS sports scientists there taking the measurements. Then there was a couple of Danish handball coaches were there, and Bill Bailey and Lorraine Brown. Lorraine Brown being the performance director, and Bill Bailey being one of the coaches were there. From that, you got selected down from about it was about a 4-hour trial, 5-hour trial, something like that. Yeah, there for the afternoon / half the day. And on the second day, you got taken to a 2-day trial in Sheffield, where we stayed overnight, played on Saturday and Sunday, and that was like yo-yo test, bleep test, agility tests, and then a lot of playing, a lot of matches, ball handling, coordination, and that's where there was a lot of Danish handball coaches who were there. Guys like Klaus Hansen and other people like that who were quite high level senior coaches who are basically picking their players for the potential GB team. At that trial, we got mixed with some of the current GB guys who are already playing, who have already been playing for a couple of years in England and moved out to Denmark. So, yeah, it was. I think in those sort of situations, it was a bit of just a throw you in, see what comes out the other end sort of thing. I don't think anyone really knew what to expect. I think it's one of the first times talent identification has really been pushed in a big way. And it was sort of en masse. So you had 6,000 people apply for all those positions. And I know a little bit had been done before with rowing and cycling, but nothing on that sort of scale, particularly for an open-ended skilled sport rather than the closed discipline sports of cycling and rowing. There's a lot more variables in play, so it's a little bit harder to know what you're looking for and know who's going to come through, because obviously a lot of that comes down to decision making. So I think they're looking for decision makers and people who could play games rather than. Well, that being said, also they're looking for your freaks. Naturally, you're looking for your 6'7" giants who can go and step into any sports and potentially be a game changer for you. So there's a wide mixture of sharper guys who make good decisions, and then a couple of big freaks in there as well. And I think I fell into the game decision making of that. Well, that's what I like.
Yeah.
I'm sure some disagree.
So in terms of your time out in Denmark, so how long were you out in Denmark? What was that kind of experience like? Tell us a bit about that.
Going out to Denmark is a massive culture change. I think the first time I went out there, I was literally kind of blown. I hadn't really travelled. I'd travelled a fair amount, but I'd never been to somewhere a Scandinavian culture before or seeing what that was about. And I was kind of taken back, first by how flat Denmark is, and then secondly, just like how different the culture is in terms of sports. Obviously, here we have rugby, football, cricket, and girls' sports, mainly netball, you'd say. I think when you went to Denmark, there is not a single netball court. Hockey's hardly played. There's football and there's handball. You won't see a pair of rugby players either. So it was a bit of a culture shock in terms of what I deem as traditional sports weren't non-entities over in Denmark and in Scandinavia in general. Also the culture in terms of where we went to the States. So for example, in England, you go through secondary school, college, do your A-levels, and then you go straight to university or on a gap year. In Denmark, you're encouraged to go to a high school or a højskole, which is basically a year spent at a sort of specialist college, where you might go to an idrætshøjskole, idræt being sport in Denmark. So you go spend a year doing sport in a high school, or you can do it in music school or drama school or anything like that to go really find yourself and sort of dive into those sports. So basically what British Handball did is they bought 15 spots at this idrætshøjskole, sports high school, where we basically went and played and joined in their school. So my first experience in Denmark was going to basically a school, like a boarding school effectively, which was kind of a bit like a bit of a weird, strange one. You could go to a 22-year-old, 21-year-old going into this environment and meeting loads of 18, 19-year-olds who are there kind of having a good time, and you're talking about maybe training for the Olympics and that sort of stuff. It's a bit of a weird one. And then just the facilities, it's the investment into sport and the investment into facilities. You don't find a sports hall smaller than 40 by 20 metres. And inside of that sports hall, you've got 3 basketball courts, 4 volleyball courts, 8 badminton courts. It's unbelievable facilities that they had out there. Not new by any stretch of imagination, like built in 1980, built in 1960, but well looked after, well thought out, and open and free for everyone to use. I think the call hire cost in Denmark, which is subsidised by the government, was £2.50 an hour, where it worked out as for a sports club. Whereas in England, you're looking at £50, £60. It's just a completely different way of viewing sport and the culture of sport in that country. The idea of health for everyone, sort of thing. It was the food was different, the culture was different. It was a great eye-opening experience, really great eye-opening experience.
And how long were you there in total? Was it just a year program, or?
So I spent my first experience was 1 week. My second experience was 2, and then I moved out there full time. So I spent from January 2008 up until 2000 and the 2010-2011 season I spent in Norway, and then I spent my 2011-2012 season back in Denmark, back at the Højskolen. Sort of the process was to try and we bought these places as Team GB. We bought places at this Højskolen. We trained as Team GB in the morning as our British handball squad with our own team, with around 12, 15 guys, and then we moved ourselves across in the evening to go and play for local club sides. And the idea was that each year you're meant to be trying to work your way up a league. So if you started in Division 3, in the next year, 2008, 2009, 2010, you're in Division 2, then Division 1, and maybe by the time you get to London 2012, you're playing in the pro leagues in that country. So the idea is it's meant to be a 4-year turnaround, which for some guys it worked out that way, for others it didn't. I could harp on all day about UKSport funding cuts and decision-making policies, which basically, if in elite sports you don't have funding, you've got nothing. You've got no chance, particularly when you talk about the investments other countries are making in their sports and the popularity of those sports in comparison as well. So I could harp on all day about how that went down. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, we got a funding cut of 50% halfway through. So at that point, it was sink or swim. Find your own solutions, either go work out in Norway as a removal man, who's what I ended up doing, and funding myself to go and play. And then I was fortunate for my last year to get a pro contract, building up to London 2012.
So how many guys ended up with a pro contract in that final year?
I think from our main team, we had of a squad of 12, we had 3 or 4 on contracts, and the rest were on maybe first division semi-pro contracts, and then a number of others were funding themselves to play.
So they were doing the kind of stuff you mentioned, so removals by day and then training by night kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. When you consider that you're running out against Mikael Hansen or Nikola Karabatic, who are played in the close to the region of £1 million a year individually, our programs fund their individual contracts worth that. That's more than the entire Team GB program. And include what their clubs then paying for the facilities and their training and all that sort of stuff. So you've got to be aware of the vastness, the gulf between the two dimensions of what you're talking about.
And you guys are training to the Olympians, and this is the budget you're operating within. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's to give you the full story, obviously in 2008 there was the funding crisis, and the way it was working at that point was Gordon Brown promised, I believe it was £600 million, £200 million from the government, £200 million from National Lottery, and £200 million from £200 million from private investment over the course of that 6-year period. In 2008, when Gordon Brown put his hands up for some money for some private investment, right at the start of the financial recession, £200 million didn't show up. Yeah. In fact, nothing showed up. So
because sport's a great investment. You always make money when you buy a football club, right?
Yeah, well, exactly, clearly, as everything's been shown. So at that point, with the £200 million investment shortfall, you left some decisions to make. National Lottery came in and put another £100 million in. Then Visa came in and put another £50 million in, which is why if you wanted to buy tickets for the Olympics in London 2012, you had to have a Visa card. A smart way of making them money back. And that left a £50 million shortfall. That £50 million shortfall kind of like, I'm pretty sure no one will admit it, but I'm pretty sure UKSport sat around and looked around and went, minor sports are getting cut. And so, bang, all the guys who went through TID into volleyball, into handball, into water polo, 50% funding cuts for all of those guys, which then seems illogical when you look at over the whole funding scheme of what happened. When you see basketball get I think it was a 200% increase, 300% increase. They went from 3 million to 9 million. At the same time as water polo went from 3.4 or 4 million down to 1.8 to 2 million. So I've got the figures in front of me, but it was something like that. So some sports found themselves on the right end of UK sport. Some others found themselves on the back end, and it's kind of like a toss of a coin to see which side you'll end up on. And I think that's going to be proven on after. If you look at the results after London 2012, and this is me going on a bit of a rant, but if you look at the results after London 2012, what the hell was the point in investing £9 million into basketball to then cut it after London 2012?
Yeah.
My favourite stat is personally water polo. Water polo, what was it? Had a funding cut of 50% pre-games in 2008. Then their women's team did all right, did quite well. So the UKSport then funded the women's team individually £4 million post-London for 1 year, where that team went on to win the gold medal at the Commonwealth Games, to then cut their funding completely now. So I don't know who these people are. I don't know how these decisions are made. That's all backed behind closed doors. You know, our chairman or our performance director would always walk back into the room and go, "Yeah, we had this board meeting and these people said this," and I'm like, "Who are these people? What are their qualifications? What are they making these decisions based upon?" So
sounds a lot
yeah,
like going snakes and ladders.
It is a little bit, and obviously it's public funding. I absolutely understand the importance of spending public money in a strategic and well managed way. I think it's exceptionally important that it's also a very transparent way for everyone to see clearly why those decisions have been made. Because at the end of the day, if you go back to 1997, if our funding policies were the same as they were in 1997, British cycling wouldn't get any funding. Which is, when you look at how British cycling is now the golden boy of UK sport, it's quite an interesting stat to say actually they wouldn't get any funding if you didn't have a funding for all policy back in 1997.
Interesting. So in terms of the kind of Talent ID program, looking back, would you consider that to be a success based on the kind of performance at the games, the number of guys who are still involved in the game, and kind of the Olympic legacy, if you like, of the guys kind of now developing handball? Or what are your thoughts?
But I could be a success. I could be a success that I made it. But it's not necessarily. I don't think saying John Pearce made it to the Olympics is probably the way to say the Talent ID program was a success. If I'm honest, no, it probably wasn't the success it could have been. Because you've got to manage those situations very, very carefully. You're taking people from other sports, transporting their whole lives across. And you've got to give people who are giving up not just their lives, not just their jobs, but their lives, their livelihoods. Guys who had mortgages, people who had families, all these sort of guys were then ruled out of it when they got to go to Denmark or that sort of stuff, And I think the whole point of TID, or talent identification in particular, was to find world-class athletes who maybe slipped through the cracks in other sports, which there really are. There are certainly guys out there who slipped through the cracks in other sports who are fantastic athletes who just need another shot, or maybe aren't playing quite the right sport, or got an injury at the wrong time, or were overlooked by a selector who didn't think they were good enough. There's thousands of these examples. I'm sure you guys, I'm sure even yourself can think of people who thought that guy's a great athlete. I'm sure, why can't he go and do something else? So we had a number of guys. I can think of three in particular. Donald Seed, who was 6'10", right-hander who could throw a ball like a million miles an hour. Gareth Priddle and Liam Back, who were three just absolute beasts, who, if they were developed in the right way and looked after properly, I'm sure could have gone on to be fantastic handball players. That being said, it's also down to finding the right mentality in those guys as well. So some guys don't go on to make their own sports or succeed in their own sports. There's also sometimes a mental factor to that as well. They didn't want it enough, or they didn't sacrifice it enough. So yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22. But I don't think our talent identification system found those freaks that we were perhaps looking for. because I know from what our sort of S&C coach always talked about from their talent identification point of view was that actually if we, in a 4-year turnaround, it's going to be difficult to get decision makers and players who understand the game as well as someone like, Michael Gagou, who plays, Mikhail Gagou plays for France. He won the Champions League in 2001 with Montpellier. And he went on to play, he went and won from that, playing with the France national team. He went and won the World Cup in 2015 in Qatar. So that's 15 years of top international level decision-making experience compared to John Pearce, who started playing handball in 2008. So it's a huge, the gulf is massive in terms of that decision-making process. So I think part of what TID was meant to do is find those athletes, those freaks who can be a game changer just because of their natural ability. And unfortunately, those freaks that we had sort of slipped through the cracks because of funding cuts, because of lack of funding, because of lack of investment.
So in terms of, what are we now, 4 years on? We're getting ready for Rio. How many of those guys are still active in handball or coaching or doing some sort of development, or have pretty much all those guys stepped away completely? What's the kind of lie of the land?
Not too bad, actually. I think a number of guys who went on to play for us at the Olympics have actually gone on and moved abroad, mostly because they've moved their lives to Denmark or Norway and this sort of thing. They've actually carried on living in those countries. So they're still heavily involved in sport, but obviously if you're looking from a return investment, there's no longer any investment from those guys in terms of England handball and England sport infrastructure. Then you've got guys like Mark Hawkins, Bobby White, Scott Harrington, a number of guys who were on the GB team building up to London 2012, and some of them going on to be GB Olympians, have all stepped into huge roles within England handball and also set up their own clubs. So I'm running Poole Phoenix Handball Club. Bobby White's gone to Ollie Katz in Milton Keynes, and he's also the ace manager. He was our captain at London 2012, and then you've got Mark Hawkins, who stepped into performance role with England handball, and he's coaching at Carl Sholton. So a number of those Olympians, and Holly Lamores as well from the women's team, who's gone on to coach at Warrington and playing for Hawks in Manchester. Then a number of these people have stepped back into the sport, and I think that's a massive bonus for the sport.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a bit about your kind of other project you've got going on. So I know for a very long time you've been telling me about the Handball Academy and your ideas for that. So tell us about what the Handball Academy is and your kind of vision for it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, the Handball Academy is basically a culmination of 8 years now. 8 years involved with handball, from a coaching and playing point of view. Mm-hmm. So working with Scott Harrington, who was part of the British Handball Association, part of the GB team, who after London 2012 went on to to be the performance director for England Handball. Handball Academy is basically a web portal designed for junior to senior to professional handball coaches, whereby we're trying to take as many resources as we can from around the world and compile them into a sort of like a professional stockpile, if you like, where anyone who wants to know a little bit about coaching or wants to know a little bit about handball or wants to know a lot about handball can step in and engage with this web portal and basically look at any sort of fundamental exercise for handball and learn just a little bit about it. So being able to put it into a set structure. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is create the perfect online forum or online portal whereby coaches from any area of the world, any sort of level of coaching are able to step in and engage with this platform. So they're able to go in, search for a session, click on an exercise, put the exercise into their own session plan, and basically session plan for themselves using exercises that coaches have already put together, or sessions or specific exercises that people have already put together. But the important thing about that is that rather than just a lot of guys who currently go onto YouTube or go onto like a training platform or go on somewhere, will see a video and go, oh great, that's brilliant, what do I do with it? It actually has the coaching notes explained, why it's important, what it's looking to do. So it's not a case of just going, here's a video, copy this. We're really trying to give the coaches the power to understand why you should do that, what are the outcomes that you're looking for, and what's the best way of progressing that onto something else. So you can engage with the content by going, all right, I'm looking for under 16 content, I'm looking for under 18 content, I'm looking for backcourt shooting, I'm looking for defensive drills, and you can find specific things that will then quite explain really nicely and clearly. And that's been a 3-4 year process now that we've been trying to put all this into place, going around the internet, checking up, getting video, getting resources, and more importantly, making sure that the web platform itself is is intrinsically functional. So you can, Rob Anderson from a non-handball background can go and click on it and understand where he should be going on the website, and to Bob in Georgia can go and click on it as well and understand where he needs to go to, and that's been a really important part of it.
So is that like a subscription that people pay for that, or how does that work?
So yeah, the first part of it's free. So all the video content goes through YouTube. We don't steal anyone else's stuff. All of our content's on through YouTube, but the ability to actually then filter and track and session plan that information is all subscription based fee. So it's £25 a year. If you want to sign up, you can sign. It's free for clubs, schools, universities, associations to sign up for. But if you, as a coach, it's then a case of you paying £25 a year to actually access that information and be able to session plan it. That's the real important thing that we've tried to do with it. We've tried to just get away from. All right, I'm looking at YouTube videos. We're trying to move really closely to I can actually take these videos, this information, and put it into a structured format, into a structured session, so that I can session plan what I'm doing over the next 6 to 10 months, and put it all into an ordered format, rather than just going through little bits of paper, losing ideas. It really gives you an opportunity to structure what you're doing.
So presumably people like PE teachers who wanted to plan lessons could use that kind of resource, as well as club coaches or multi-sport coaches, those kind of things.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the key thing, and that's what we work so hard to get correct and get right for people, is that anyone can step into this platform, whether it's a teacher or a training teacher who's looking at it for the first time, or whether it's a professional coach who's training a professional team. They can step in and actually just use this platform easily for whatever they want. So if you go onto our exercise library, for example, there's on our filter system, you can go coach level, beginner, advanced, elite. You can go into delivery methods, small-sided games, individual drills. I think also what's been quite useful for us is we've been able to use the LTAD model, so long-term athlete development models. We've managed to phase some of our training sessions in through that. So you could say, for example, if you went onto the LTAD model, you go, right, I want an exercises for 11 to 15-year-olds. And by filtering our sessions, you can find age group-specific material for that age group. Or I want beginners, I want under 12s to 8-year-olds. And you can then filter our material to find specific age-relevant information for those year groups. So it's all filtered, it's all categorised, and I think it hopefully brings it and makes it a lot simpler for people to use and understand.
And £25 a month, I mean, that's ridiculously cheap, really, isn't it?
Well, it's £25 a year. So
a year, yeah.
Yeah, so
$50 a week, basically.
Accessible.
So in terms of your coaching philosophy, obviously being involved in a sport that's maybe not one of the primary sports in the UK, so not your football, your rugby, your cricket that you've mentioned, how does that affect your personal coaching philosophy? Because obviously you might not have access to the guys who are going to have football and rugby as their number one. So what's your coaching philosophy in handball, and how's that been affected by working in a sport that's not the kind of top tier?
My handball coaching philosophy, wow, yeah. I get asked this question, like, we do all this sort of stuff a lot with England Handball, with coaching, now that I'm working in the school as well. What's your philosophy? What's your idea? And I think it changes all the time. It's always evolving. It's always changing. I mean, I used to be very fixed in my mindset. I used to be, this is the way it's done. You play handball this way, and that's kind of taken directly, sort of from my head coach Dragon Jukic, who I was in. He coaches this way, I coach that way. This is the way handball is. And when I started off, that's very much what I did. And then it's kind of evolved into giving people more freedom, seeing more coaches, being involved in schools a lot more, understanding kids more, understanding how they're thinking and what their motivations are. So if I'm honest, when I say, do I have a coaching philosophy, I guess it's finding what works best. Is probably my philosophy, and that's very open-ended, but I think coaching is a very open-ended spectrum with a lot of you see so much information and so much disinformation out there now. It's very hard to know what's actually, I don't know, or even if it is possible to have a formula that works. So I think it's about finding what works best and then being able to suit that into that environment correctly. So adaptability is a big one for me, being able to adapt. I think session planning is massively important. Or when I say session planning, just having an idea of where you want it to go, but being able to adapt it and move off from something. Because I think we've all been in a situation where we've gone, here's my plan, and then you started, and that plan's just forget that. That's not
Yeah,
working.
done that a few times myself.
We've got to go somewhere else, and that's one of the things that I think I really like about the Handball Academy is that we're able to. It gives you option A, B, C, D. You can have 2 or 3 plans which then tail off each other. Mm-hmm. So adaptability is absolutely massive. I've been working quite a lot recently on autonomy, trying to get kids or people that I'm coaching now to have a say in what they want to do. A big part of that comes down to adaptability as well. So rather than start the session going, right, we're doing this, this is what we're going to do, I might go, right, you've got 3 choices, shooting, defence, or fast breaks. And they'll go, oh yeah, let's do fast breaks. Well, we're going to do that then, because actually if you guys want to do fast breaks, you're going to enjoy that a lot more than me going, right, we're going to do this. Now, of course, there's times when you've got to say, actually, no, we have to do some defence work now, or we have to do some set position work now, and this sort of stuff. But throwing those options every now and again, or even getting them to think about what do they want to work on over a 6-week period, really increase that level of autonomy for them and gets them really to buy into it. And you get a better engagement out of it. So yeah, adaptability, getting that autonomy out of them, and key core fundamentals, but not me sort of deriving those fundamentals into them, but trying to get them to understand why those fundamentals are important. I'll take a clear example. Back when I first started doing my my England U18 coaching, I wasn't really qualified as a coach. I wouldn't say I was a brilliant coach, but I had a very good level of technical knowledge from studying the game. So I brought that technical knowledge in and I tried to place it directly onto the kids under 18s. And yes, it worked, and yes, they did it, but did they actually understand why they were doing it and how it applied to the game? Probably not. And now a lot more of it is actually consistently questioning what they're doing and why they're doing it to try and drip feed them towards the right answer. Because if you can appreciate and understand why you're doing something, you've got a greater chance of doing it correctly at the right time.
I think there's a real kind of polarization of...
this is the moment I need to be in this position.
Yeah,
Sorry, say again?
Polarization of the kind of idea of what coaching is. Like, you get one coach who's basically like, all my players are pawns and I'm the chess master and I just need them to do what I tell them to do. And then there's the other one who goes, I almost want them to take complete ownership, and when match day comes, I sit in the stands and it just happens, this fluid smoothness of performance, because they all understand their piece to play and what they're doing and how. And it's like either end of the spectrum, isn't it? You get
absolutely
divides.
Yeah, absolutely. I think coming from obviously I came from a senior team level. I came from competing in Denmark and Norway in the top leagues, and then competing with Team GB at the Olympics, whereby there was a plan and you played to that plan. And the coach would set out his strategy, and then you're meant to be a good enough player to sort of step into that strategy and make it work. Whereby I feel and that's one way of doing it. I'm not saying that's the right way, but that was how we actually worked with our Team GB. It was you play this way, and that's the system. You're good enough to make the system work. Whereby I think with youth development, you want to give them, right, you can play you've got a box of tools, and your box of tools is endless. Like, you can do left, you can go right, you can go over, you can under, you can go around, you can step one way and come back the other. All the options are open for you, and it's up to you to find the right option at the right time. And I think trying to develop that sort of strategy leaves more options open for you when you become a senior player. You got the more your arsenal, the better player you'll be. I think that works. I think that works across all sports, really.
It sounds. I don't know if you saw recently. I did a post on my kind of coaching philosophy called the toolbox method. It's exactly what you're saying. Like, at under 18, under 16 level, you don't know where these guys are going to go. But what I do know is where they go, the person that's training them from a strength and conditioning point of view is probably going to require some of these key skills from them. So if I can give them these key skills, when they go to this level, the next guy's job is easier, because he goes, oh, you can already squat. Brilliant, we're going to front squat. Oh, yeah, I know what a front squat is. I'll do it. And it's a bit like that, isn't it? It's like you don't know what that next step up is, but if I can give you this toolbox and you're competent at these skills, then you'll be able to apply them whatever the context is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, if I think a handball specific example for that, it was we're playing matches, and one of the boys is throwing these massive long balls over the top, and he's just launching them, just absolutely launching them. They're going nowhere near the guy who needs to throw it to. But rather than and part of me wants to get angry. Part of me wants to be like, "What the hell are you doing? It's nowhere near him. Like, stop." But then the other part of me is actually, battling and realizing, actually, in 3 years' time, he needs to be able to make that pass. So if I don't let him make this pass now and actually try and work on it in a match situation, he's not going to throw it when it really matters, because that fast break pass could be the end result of us getting a 1-0 win, scoring in the last 30 seconds, whatever it may be. So actually, this is the time. This is the time for him to make those mistakes, because we're in training. But the important thing is that we have the conversation of, why are you missing that pass? What could we do better to make that pass more accurate? Are you throwing the pass at the right time, or just because you want to throw the long ball and try and be a glory hunter? Like, what do you understand why you're making that decision? That's the important thing, rather than me going, no, don't throw that pass, do the easy part. Actually, that's a brilliant bit. If you 40 metres and hit someone, that's fantastic. Why should I not encourage that, or try and get him to understand why and when to do that skill, rather than going, you're missing it now, stop doing it. So that was one of the examples for me, because it stuck with me really. Because I think a lot of guys would be like, I think a lot of what I've seen in junior coaching before is, particularly with coaches who maybe haven't got a wider experience with it, go, no, this is what to do, do it this way, rather than allowing them to find their own feet, or setting up examples for them to find their own feet, or make their own decisions. Yeah, I think it's quite important.
I think that's something that Louis and I talked about, and actually I think something he does really well is, having done it, I guess, with the kind of top level in the GB beach volleyball guys, but his whole thing is, I want to create problem solvers, and I want to create people who can fix their own mistakes. But to do that, there needs to be this level of analysis. So, brilliant, make this mistake, but now we need to cognitively think, what's going wrong, what's the solution, and I'm not just going to give you the solution. I'm not just going to say to you, pass it left instead of right. I'm going to say to you, what other options do you have? Is that the best option? What's another good, as coaches, we're often the bearer of knowledge. We just want to step in and go, stop doing that, start doing this. But actually, that doesn't create a problem solver. It just gives them the information explicitly.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's difficult to do, because obviously as a coach, you're sitting there watching it, and the longer you're quiet and the longer you're waiting for someone to try and work this out, it's quite a painful experience. It can literally be like pulling teeth at times as you're trying. But I think that's where in practice and in sort of competition, we need to make our obviously our practice replicate competition, and we need to try and give those kids more scenarios which are game realistic. Obviously, I've read a lot of research about actually doing static passing and closed line drills, for example, aren't game realistic. So it's almost like you have to relearn the skill when you go into a game situation, because you've got new stimulus which you've never had put on you before.
Yeah,
and I thought that was quite an interesting piece. So yeah, I'm very much for getting to a base skill level, and then trying to make it as game realistic as possible, whereby I give you a situation and I won't explain what to do. I'm quite a big fan of, here's the situation, you've got 3 defenders, 4 attackers, come up with a solution, go. And then after 5, 6, 20 attempts, if we can't find their own solution, we'll go through then, right, what are you thinking here? What are you thinking in this situation? Particularly with coaching girls, I found coaching girls to be painstaking sometimes, because it's a case of, I watch my under 18 girl team play, and I'll stop, and I'll go, stop right now, right, what are you thinking? What are you thinking right now? And it could be, the answer sometimes I get could be anything. It could be anything. I'm thinking my shoes don't fit properly, or I'm thinking, I don't know what position I am, or I'm thinking nothing. Some people literally turn around and go, I'm thinking nothing. And it's like, no. You got to understand, like, the difference of being actively engaged to actively involved. Like, if you're involved, yeah, you're hearing the drill, but you're not actively engaged by it. You're not actually thinking about what you're going to do. And that sort of goes through that process of unconscious conscious competence to unconscious competence, that sort of stuff. So, sorry, unconscious competence. So it's one of those things whereby getting people to think about what they're doing increases their level of performance much quicker and gets them to that level of unconscious competence, which is really important, I like to think.
In terms of your kind of coaching and your development, you mentioned a few already, but who's been your biggest influence, would you say, in terms of your coaching style, methods, philosophy?
Probably, the guy that had the most experience with Dragan Djukic was my head coach, and he got a lot of stuff wrong. He got a lot of stuff wrong with us, but he also got a lot of stuff right. So he's an EHF master coach, so the highest level of coach that you can be in European handball. And his philosophy around coaching and the ideas and sort of the technical and tactical knowledge is just outrageous. Just you can name a player in the Serbian third division, and he'll know his stats from 2015 all the way through to the current year. Just like unbelievable. So his tactical and technical knowledge were brilliant. His management skills for us as a team, maybe not so great. So I think I've learned a lot from him in terms of how to manage people, how not to manage people, but also just technically and tactically on how to play the game was superb. And then I've had the wide range of experience from sort of Serbian autocratic coaches. It's done this way. This is how we play. All the way through to Danish. The Danish coaches being on pretty much on the autocratic, and then also to the laissez-faire sort of end of the spectrum. So I've had that wide variety of coaching styles, and I found that the Danish system very much like very, very competitive, very, very competitive, very, very. I want to beat you, but I'm also your friend. In this kind of way, where the Serbian way, the autocratic way comes, I beat you and I grind you into the ground, sort of thing, which is quite entertaining. So I think that combination of autocratic and democratic styles, and seeing that and being coached by both styles has been really important to sort of determining my own philosophy and how I'm trying to coach. And you still learn, you still see different things, you still pick up different ideas. Being involved with school sport has massively affected how I view coaching, and how I used to let everything affect me a lot. I think I used to let everything affect me a lot. I'd be very emotionally engaged with the session, and I want it to be done. I would want it to be done how I see it being done. So when you sort of tell a kid or you speak to the kids and you go, right, we're doing this, of course naturally you have a vision of how it's meant to look, and having that vision or this idea of how it's meant to look actually stops you from. So all of a sudden, this should be done this way in my head. But actually, when the kids go and come up with their solution, it can be completely different. Doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's just different to how I picture it being done, or or the intensity I want them to go into it with. So that's something that, having been teaching in schools, just to sit back and give it a bit to let kids find their own feet has been quite important. Rather than, don't get me wrong, there are times that there needs to be a bit of stick, but there also needs to be a bit of carrot and a bit of give at the same time. Having that balance of both worlds.
So what do you think has been your biggest success as a coach?
Biggest success as a coach? Probably my results-wise was beating Israel in 2013, 2014 at the European Open. Israel were then coached by Dragan Djukic. After coaching GB, he went and coached the Israeli team.
It's a bit of a situation where the student becomes the teacher and beats the teacher.
Yeah, it was quite nice. It was a lovely experience, and we took our under GB under 19 team to the European Open, and our first match was against Israel under 19s, and Dragan was coaching their under 19 team. We were coaching ours, and that was the first ever victory for a GB youth team. That was obviously, as a results point of view, that was obviously fantastic for us, and seeing some of the guys come through. In terms of actual coaching, though, my biggest achievement, I think actually getting two full functioning squads, playing for Poole Phoenix Juniors is probably my biggest achievement by far, and getting those guys engaged with handball and seeing it as their primary sport, some of them now, which is really nice to see. And getting people who haven't really found that a sport they liked, or a club or something like that hasn't quite hit the right markers for them, and then bringing them into handball and trying to give them that whole club feel and what it's like to be part of a team has been really important. So we now have pretty much 2 full teams for under 18 girls. We've got under 18 boys and under 16 boys now as well. So from my standpoint, and obviously getting people involved in handball and my development roles within the handball, getting that in place is massive, and I'm really, really pleased with that.
So what about your biggest failure as a coach? Where do you think you've kind of not stepped up to the mark?
Sorry, say that again, pal?
Your biggest failure as a coach, what do you think that is?
Biggest failure as a coach? It used to be being too much like Dragon. It used to be, I was very one-dimensional, obviously I'd been involved with Dragon for so long that I assumed his way of coaching was the right way, and I took that directly into what I was doing. My biggest failure, if I think currently, I'm not too sure at the moment. I'm not too sure what it is. I've been working very hard, I'm self-assessing and seeing what I'm bad at, and what I used to be bad at was I would be, this is what we're doing, this is the way it is, and I think I'm opening that up more as we go. I can handle sometimes, so I can still get angry, frustrated, because I don't know whether it's because I want all of my sessions, or all the sessions that we do as a club, to have a certain level of intensity. And I'm a big advocate of train how you play. Which means as most coaches know, if your sessions don't replicate the intensity or the likelihood of a match, you'll play like that in a match. So when I see some of our kids that sort of like lazing about or not concentrating or going through a drill at 50%, then I sometimes fly off the handle a little bit and just be like, you've got to think about what we're doing here and why do you want to do it and what are we trying to achieve from this. So if we're doing game realistic exercises, they've got to be done at game realistic speed. So I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure what my biggest failing is. Probably overthinking. Probably overthinking, because I'm very aware of all this coaching philosophy stuff, and so then I end up overthinking it and trying to put all of it in place, and then rather than just sticking to what, keep it simple.
So what are the challenges you're currently facing within the kind of England handball setup, within Poole Phoenix? What are the kind of things the hurdles you're having to get over at the moment?
Obviously, funding's always going to be an issue with minor sports. I think any sport in England can appreciate the funding situation and where sports are viewed on a scale of importance, particularly now with the BCE levels and inactivity levels within schools and within society in general. Obviously, I'm aware that the new Sport England funding strategy is being produced, but I think when you look at that sporting funding strategy, all you had to do was look at the questionnaire to wonder where supporting was going wrong. I think the questionnaire that was put out to people within England was 68 pages long with 125 questions, all open-ended questions. And when you talk about keeping it simple and keeping people engaged by sport, a questionnaire like that just hits the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah. The people who are involved on a daily basis are probably not going to want to fill out a questionnaire that long.
Oh my God. I would love
time, number one.
I would love to know the response rate. I would absolutely love to know the response rate of who filled out that form, because it's so long. I was going to fill it out. I answered one question and stopped. I think all I did was write an email back saying this questionnaire is ridiculous. I think that's all I did. I replied directly to them. So for us, funding is always a big issue. I think any sport can find that. Facilities, as our own club, we don't own our own facility, so we're always waiting and moving around from facility to facility to find the best venue for hall hire and all that sort of stuff. But from England handball point of view, I think it's a case of overcoming sports hall sizes in the UK are a big issue. You would think that with the weather that we have in England, indoor space would be paramount with points, but unfortunately it's not. So unfortunately in the UK we build sports halls behind badminton courts. Why, I don't know. But it means that most sports halls just about fit a basketball court or a volleyball court in, rather than if you built it to the European standard, which is a handball court, you fit 8 badminton courts, 3 volleyball courts, 4 basketball courts in there. So sports hall space is of key importance. And I think the way we're going to keep on working with that is just by making sure that we adapt. We adapt as we go along. We find ways of coming up with new ideas which are going to engage kids with what we're doing.
So what's next for John Pearce? What do you see next couple of years? What have you got your eye on?
I think the big one for us now is that we finally finished the testing phase of the Handball Academy. So Handball Academy has taken 4 years for us to get to this stage. And we are just about to go into our final testing stage. Well, in fact, we've gone through it now. We're about finishing at the end of this month. So, the big thing we want to do with the Handball Academy is create and share this and provide handball coaches and teachers with the tools to plan and deliver sessions. So we've now finished that process. We've got people to test it, and hopefully that's going live at the start of next month. So once that goes live, that'll be a weight off my shoulders, which will be quite nice. Finally seeing that bit of work go live. Carry on with the beach handball, carry on with Poole Phoenix. I think from our side of things, getting Poole Phoenix Handball Club running and functioning so it's no different to your local rugby club. Well, hopefully, actually no, that's a lie. I hope it's very different to your local rugby club, but there shouldn't be any difference in terms of the structures that we provide, in terms that we are able to provide under 6s all the way through to 3 or 4 senior teams. That's the key thing for us. I think being able to engage and adapt and continue to build that club environment is very, very important, not just from a development point of view, but also from a performance point of view. If we're going to have decent handball players in the future who are able to challenge for one day, I hope, gold medals at the Olympics and European Cup titles and all this sort of stuff, it's important that we develop these players now from when they're at the age of 8 to 16. So when they're 26 to 34, they've got all the skills they require. And coaching at GB under 21 level and coaching at GB under 18 level isn't going to produce the players that we need, because I only see those kids for 60 days a year. Whereas if I'm working with them at Poole Phoenix or at Dorset County, I'm seeing them once a week, every week, if not twice a week, to make the difference with them. So that's an important thing. So build up the handball club, launch a handball academy, continue the handball domination, I suppose. We'll see.
Right, the empire.
Yeah, something like this.
So what piece of advice would you give to coaches at the moment who are coaching kind of younger age groups, developing athletes? Any kind of advice you would give them? Don't
be afraid to challenge yourself, I'd say. Don't be afraid to challenge and adapt, right? I think a lot of me stuff, particularly with books like Bounce, and with, who was it? I think it's David Didow, with what I knew about education was wrong. Don't be afraid to challenge conformity, in terms of just question yourself. Always think about, what about this? What about that? Could I try this? And try it and see what works. And sometimes don't be scared to let kids have a go and say, right, if you're going to coach a session, what should we do today? The number of times I've done that with juniors to go, what should we do today? And they've gone, let's play a match. And the tendency is to go, no, we have to do half an hour drills, 10 minutes of exercises, then we play a match for 20 minutes at the end. Well, if all these kids want to play a match and they're 12 years old, what's really the harm in playing a match? Rather than trying to drill some kids. Because a number of times we've done drills with kids and they go, this is boring. This is boring. Why can we play a match now?
Well, that's the big hanging out for as a kid, isn't it? You're always putting up the drills so you can play the match at the end.
Yeah, exactly. So can we not find a way of making the matches engaging enough or structuring the matches in a way that creates that same learning that we've had from the drills? Is certainly one way of looking at it. Or do a match and then change the way. Start with the match and then finish with drills. Or or make drills like matches. So there's rewards for them for the winning team and that sort of stuff. So yeah, just the growth mindset philosophy really, isn't it? Don't be afraid to adapt and change.
So you kind of, I guess, in a little bit answered my next question, which were any sort of books that you'd recommend or resources that you would you highlight. So you mentioned Bounce, Matthew Syed, Growth Mindset. What was the third one? Everything I Know About Education is Wrong or something?
Yeah, a book by David Didell, I think. What if everything you knew about education was wrong? And it goes on to just really questions everything that we've previously thought about education, and also what can you put into your own coaching philosophy? Because I think there are similarities between education and coaching. Because I think we like to give a lot of titles to things: coach, teacher, educator, lecturer. Actually, we're pretty much all the same thing. We're trying to provide a situation for learning. You may have this title, I may have that title, but actually, at the end of the day, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're trying to help people learn. You're trying to make people learn how to lift the weights. I'm trying to make people learn how to throw a handball. You're trying to make people learn how to do maths. It's all the same thing. We're trying to provide a situation or a stimuli for learning, and do that in the simplest and easiest way. So the title of educator or coach or lecturer and this sort of stuff doesn't necessarily lose its terminology, but they're much more closely linked, I think, than people like to think they are.
So any other books that you would highlight at the moment?
I think for me, actually, now with the amount of YouTube that there is and the amount of online material that there is as well, I quite like to actually just go and directly listen. I've been following the author of Bounce's YouTube channel, for example. I've been going on TED Talks. These are great online forums which I've been listening to. I find it a lot easier to sit down and listen to a TED Talk or listen to someone speak through that rather than reading a book. And I think that's where I engage a lot better in that. That's how I learn best. Fair
enough. So where can people find out more about your projects, about Poole Phoenix, about the Handball Academy? If people want to contact you, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. I've got so many email addresses now from all these different projects that I'm doing that you could probably a million different ones. But the Handball Academy is literally www.thehandball.academy. You can find us by simply typing in Poole Phoenix Handball into Google, or if you go through englandhandball.com, go on to contact, you'll find a picture of my lovely face, and you can click on that and contact me through that. So, yeah, I'm happy to share knowledge. I'm happy to get my theories or my ideologies questioned and challenged. So, yeah, certainly, I'd love to hear from people, see what they think, find out what they want to do.
Awesome, John. Well, I've kept you. I think you've been my longest guest so far. So we obviously had a good discussion. So I won't keep you much longer because obviously it's getting late into the night. But thank you very much for your time. I'm sure it's been very useful. It's been useful for me, so I hope it's useful for anyone else who comes across the video.
Thanks so much, Rob. You're more than welcome, pal.